Welcome to the Powered by Age-Friendly City Zoomcast reality-style podcast.
We are movers and shakers, shaking up the old notion of silent, helpless, invisible seniors.
This is a new series of podcasts funded by the City of Vancouver and the 411 Senior Center Society.
As PBA AFC ambassadors, we
raise awareness,
share our original stories and poems,
inform, advocate, and involve seniors in discussing important social issues.
In short, these podcasts will help us,
you, in creating an age-friendly city for Vancouver today,
tomorrow the world.
You can hear us everywhere podcasts are heard. Hello and welcome to Powered by Age. This is our first Thursday in Women's International History and Heritage Month. And I'm Charlotte Ferrell, the host. And today we're going to be talking about we choose to challenge new ways, alternative ways of making money. And Lesley and Nansey have some special presentations. I'm going to talk a bit about that. Chris, actually, everybody that's on has something they can share about new ways they're making money. Joel is on the line. So
I don't know about that. I'm still looking.
Well, it's new ways. It doesn't necessarily always make money, right?
That's right. That said, I've got some interesting stuff I'm working on, so I'll share that in a sec. But go on.
Okay, we'll start with, first just introduce yourself, starting with Nansey, then Lesley and Chris.
Oh, hi, I'm Nansey Sinclaire, and I live on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, beautiful BC. Yes.
Me too. I don't live there, but I'm here.
Oh, there you go.
Vancouver Island.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Wherever that is. Wherever that is in Zoom land, it's kind of irrelevant, but yeah. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
Zoom room everywhere. I have a variety of interests, outdoors being one of them in particular, and a writer and focusing on encouraging myself, inspiring myself to keep writing, and pet sitting. I'm a pet sitter and have a pet sitting business that I've been focusing on for the last 7 years, and have a lot of fun with that. It's been affected quite a bit with COVID, but I sure enjoy the opportunity to hang out with all these little pups and get outside and enjoy the fresh air every day. So that's me.
Okay, and she's going to be telling us a little bit more later about what she does to make this business special and how long she's had it going. Lesley?
Yes, I'm Lesley Hebert. I live in New Westminster, and I'm actually very excited right now because next Thursday evening at 6:00 is going to be the launch of a poetry book that's been put together by our poet laureate. It's called New Westminster Poetry of Place, and I have a poem featured in that collection.
Yes.
So I'm very excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Chris?
I'm Chris Morrissey, and I live in East Vancouver, and I participate in Britannia Community Centre, and I'm with a group called Quirky, the Queer Imaging and Writing Collective for Elders. We're not too fussy about how we spell words like writing because we have to make it all fit quirky. We just last week we just had the launch of I think our seventh anthology. So we did a Zoom launch with SFU with Women and Gender Studies. It's their 50th anniversary, so we joined with them to do the launch of our latest anthology. So that's me, and I'm currently in Holy Family Hospital in rehab. So sometimes you might see people walking behind me or things happening over which I have no control.
Joel?
I'm Joel, and I'm with Podstream Studios, partners with 411 Senior Center, and helping produce these podcasts and technical support on several areas of the 411 Senior Center. And I've been in Campbell River for an extended period of time still. Meant to get back over fairly quickly, and probably, I don't know, within the next week or so, I would say. stuff at the studio I got to take care of. But over here, getting some work done on a PhD and a recording project, which I can talk about at the point where we're sharing our stories. So that'll be interesting when you hear what snuck up out of nowhere while I've been over here. And I'm trying to get it finished off before I go back because I'd like to get that done in a way. So.
Okay, so we'll go back up to hearing about Nansey's pet sitting and care business.
Oh, thank you. So it's Happiest Pup Pet Sitting Services. And so I started, and it wasn't under the same name when I first started. When I first started pet sitting business, it's about 7 years ago. And it came from that whole adage of, what is it I love to do that I'm passionate about, whether I was making money at it or not, and what would that be? And I have a huge love of dogs. I've had dogs, my whole life sort of thing. And I'm very blessed. I have a gift of being able to connect with dogs. And there's just a deep, deep connection. So they trust me, they listen to me, they heed, they just connect very deeply. And so I started pet sitting and dog walking. And I'm very active. I love to be outside. So it was just a nice combination of being outside, maintaining physical fitness, enjoying the environment, enjoying the animal, connecting with the dogs to, with commands and just having them experience being outside and they make me laugh. They're just so loving and every dog has its own personality. And whenever I've spoken to the owners, I always try to find out as much as I can in terms of, what is their day look like? What are the routines? What are their expectations? What are their habits? What are they fearful of? What are they happy about? What brings them joy? What do they like? What are they nervous about? And so to maintain what it is that dog's used to. And so a lot of people, for different reasons, they either need to have somebody come and walk their pet because they're busy at work. Of course, things have changed with COVID so much that a lot of people are at home. But even with that, it's at times makes it difficult for them to get the dogs outside to get their exercise. And and high energy dogs, larger dogs, they definitely need to have that exercise regardless of the weather. And sometimes people are just so caught up and busy with what they're doing. They may have some health issues themselves. They may have some, may have to go out of town for business or family things, whatever's going on. And they just need somebody that they can trust that'll get to know the dog, take the dog out, have the dog explore and do what they need to do. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with taking somebody's dog out for a walk. It's so much more involved than I'm just going to put a lead on the dog and take the dog for a walk around the block or up into the trails for an hour. There's a lot of responsibility. And so getting to know what the dog is, like I say, comfortable with. I have some dogs that are very fearful, say, of a bus, if a vehicle goes by. And, I need to know how to make that dog feel safe and supported and not fearful. Sometimes the dog will get reactive towards somebody else, stranger walking down the street. Perhaps a man with a black jacket and a hat on could make the dog nervous. And so it's really about just connecting with the dogs and even things in terms of their recall. If we go hiking up into the trees, what is, are they going to come back? Can't even imagine the responsibility of a dog going off into the bush and not coming back. But it's just been such a fulfilling thing to do, to take a dog out in the trails and to watch how much fun they have running around, whether with other dogs or on their own, exploring nature, exploring the trees and just watching what they have to do. And they're comical. They just have so much fun. And then I feel really good about the fact that I know I'm providing a service for the pet owner because it's taken one less thing off their plate for the day that they have to be responsible for. And, you know, to have the dog come back and it's had its exercise, it's had its, you know, engagement, it's been able to do something instead of the dog suffering in the sense of, you know, having to just sit around the house because the owner's so busy that they don't have the time, even though they have the intention and even though they want to, you know, be able to get the dog out. But it's just very satisfying to know that now the dog's needs have been met, the owner's needs have been met. There's a trust relationship between myself, the pet owner, the dog themselves. And whether the owner is at the house, which 9 times out of 10 they're not at the house when I go pick up the dog just knows it's Nansey. I can go, I can be safe, I can have fun, and I'll get back home again, and I get to eat and sleep.
I've always wondered when I see people walking dogs, how do you get the dogs to get along with each other?
Well, you know, it has a lot to do, I believe, with the energy of the person that's walking the dog. And I've had experiences over time, whether it's been with my own dogs, when I had my own dogs or other people's dogs, where, you know, I'll come across a person and they'll be like, well, you know, my dog doesn't like other dogs. And, you know, my dog's really stressed out, or my dog's this, or my dog's that. Well, actually, quite honestly, it's not the dog, it's the owner. Because if they're uptight, and, you know, they're hanging on to that lead, all that energy from that owner is running down their body into the lead, into the animal. And the dogs are very sensitive. I mean, they're beings, right? They pick up on our energy. So if we're feeling nervous, anxious, unsure, tense, angry, upset about something else, all of that's going to go into the dog. And I'm a big believer in space when it comes to dogs. So what I notice a lot is on the trails or the dog parks, whatever, and people will walk with their dogs, all different sizes and breeds and temperaments, this, that, and the other thing. And the people have the best of intentions because as they pass by each other, they just want to stop and chat and be respectful and friendly and interactive. But what they don't realize quite often is as they stop, all the dogs are now stopped. And you can have big dogs, little dogs, and some on leash, some off leash, some very nervous, some with health issues, whatever else is going on. And the little dogs will feel intimidated by the big dogs, and the dogs in general. All they see are the people's hips and waists, and so all of a sudden you've come to a standstill. The people are talking, and oh, your dog's so cute, or what about this, or what about that? But they're not thinking about the energy and what's going into the dogs. So now the dogs are very close to one another, and it can be very intimidating for them. So I'm a big believer in space. It's wonderful to be friendly to people and say hi and inquire about their dog, but keep the movement, keep the space, keep them going. So for me, with the dogs, I just think that space is really important, and then watching the signals and the signs from the dogs as they start coming up to another dog, as they're coming up to another person. What are some of the behaviors that they're exhibiting? Are they starting to show that they're nervous? Are they excited? You know, and everybody has a different interpretation of what's acceptable. Like some people, if a dog jumps up on them, they're like, well, who cares? It doesn't bother them in the least. But you never know somebody's experience that they've had with the dog. So they could have had a really poor experience in the past. So they could feel really intimidated or scared or nervous or unsure because maybe they've never even been around a dog before. So it really comes down to the calmer you are as the person walking the dogs, and the more confidence you have, and the more you pay attention to the signals of the dogs and what they're doing, and just keep movement, that is what I think keeps everybody just in check. You've got everything under control, and it's moving nicely. And paying attention, like just really being aware of what's going on. And that's my experience anyway with the dogs.
How do you advertise or promote your business?
Well, I had in the past, I thought this was kind of cool. Because I was doing a lot of trail hiking and stuff before COVID. And I had got these little flags, you know, trail markers. And I had stapled my business card onto the trail markers because we have amazing trails around here. but quite honestly, even before I started walking some of the dogs in those trails, I'd be walking along. Now, did I turn left or did I turn right? So I started marking the trails for other people. And then I just came up with this idea to staple my business card onto the flags. And it was very successful. It was like people, I thought this was a nice way to find you. And I've had some long-term clients as a result of that. And so some of the other typical social media type of things, which is not my strength at all. And word of mouth primarily. A lot of my businesses come from word of mouth. And I have people that I've been providing service for them for the 7 years. And they're the first to offer a testimonial to the satisfaction that they've had with being able to trust me and the success that the animals have had with me.
Okay, does anyone else have any questions for Nansey?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Nansey, do you have a maximum number of dogs that you'll walk at any one time?
It depends, actually, Lesley, on the type of dogs, the breed, and the personalities of the dogs. I can tell quite often ahead of time if they're going to be a good mix or not. So if I have the commitment, say, to the first couple of dogs and then other people ask me to come in, it'll be based on the breed that's being requested to come in. And if I think that the ones that I have at the core, is it going to be a good fit? And I have had, I used to supervise in a doggy daycare. And I've done the thing when I've watched, 20 dogs at a time. I've done it. It's not something that I really promote. So for my personal business, 6 is the maximum that I like to have. And it's primarily for the sake of the dogs, because if it just becomes too stressful. I want them to have fun. I want them to enjoy it. And the other thing that comes into it as well is even transporting the dogs, like to go and pick them up and then get them to the trailhead. It can be really nerve-wracking for the dogs traveling with other dogs if it's not a good fit. And then for safety, they need to be in crates depending on the vehicle that I'm using. And I have heard from people that I've walked their dogs that some of their experiences have been with other companies where, like, the dog walker has been a great fit for the dog itself. It's been very successful, but when they've come to pick up that particular dog, they open up the vehicle and they expect this new dog to jump up into a vehicle that's already filled with other dogs. And it's very intimidating. So that's an important factor, is getting the dog from point A to point B in a comfortable way.
Yeah.
And so that particular person stopped taking on the service because once they got to the trailhead, it was okay, but it was getting there and back. And I equated it to, like, as a person, I think we probably all had that experience. Say if you're getting on a bus or a tour bus or some sort of situation that's outside of what you're used to. And, and if a vehicle stopped, like let's say you're on a holiday or something, all-inclusive holiday, and a big bus stops and they open it up, okay, come on, jump on in. And if nobody greets you or says hi to you and you don't know who these people are, they don't speak the same language as you, or they don't move over to make room for you in your suitcases or whatever it is, it's an intimidating feeling. So for the dog's going from the ground, climbing up into a vehicle to a whole bunch of dogs and people that they don't know, and expected to come in and sit down and get settled. So it causes stress. It causes them to be anxious. So that's one of the reasons I like to limit it. 6 is comfortable.
Yeah.
30, 20 I've done before, but not really my thing.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Nansey.
Anybody else?
Question.
Oh, Joel got
Right.
Joel has one.
I didn't catch, maybe early you addressed this, but is it your own company or is it part of one of those, like the app type groups?
Oh, you're thinking of like Rover. Yeah, no, it's my own company. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But I also do work through rover.com, and that's the only company I'm familiar with. And I quite like them. They're very supportive. They just cover all aspects they give a person who wants to have their dog cared for, either overnight or a dog walk, everything you need. They just take care of everything. So the person that is hired on as a dog walker has to, have credibility, has to be insured. They take care of all of those factors. And if there's ever any sort of emergency, which I've never had an emergency, they're there for support as well. Not only for the dog walker, dog sitter, but also for the owner themselves, right? So
there is a value there for those services.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I didn't know if you were not with them because of them not having that type of value and you're doing your own thing, or it's a supplement to what you're already doing, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, the second one is supplemented. And I enjoy both. The thing about the rover.com is, like, let's just say for whatever reason, if something wasn't working out during the course of the stay, they will help not only the owner, but the sitter find an alternative to step in. So right. I just think that gives people peace of mind. And private business is going to do the same thing, but obviously their network is greater, right? It's bigger.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Nansey.
Yeah.
I would, if I had a dog, I would trust you with it. But one experience that you shared about the bears and the dog.
Oh,
yes, yeah. I know it's interesting because I've had a number of bear encounters over the years, and had them with my own dogs, and then had them with the clients' dogs last year, and it's really interesting, kind of tuning into intuition and stuff, because we're up in the trails in a beautiful place. We go there all the time. And I had been thinking that I was going to listen to something in particular on my phone with my earpiece in. And then I thought, no, I'm going to choose not to do that. So it was really, really present in terms of what was going on. And two pups that I just love and adore. So I walk them a lot, and then they come and stay with me overnight a lot. And they're very comical. Anyway, we were walking back, and I could look down the distance, and I saw something on the trail, and I don't know how far away we were, but quite a ways to start with. And I was like, well, that's an awfully big dog, but I don't think it's a dog. So we got a little bit closer, and I realized it was a bear. And the pups had been off leash. And just in that moment, I just knelt down, called them over, put them on the lead, and then I just continued to crouch down, watch the bear, which he was just beautiful, like the shiny, like the luster of his coat and everything. And anyways, he just sat there, looked at us. We stayed crouched. The dogs didn't respond or react or anything. And I don't think they even actually realized the bear was there. And the bear was in the middle of the trail, crossed over, went to the other side. And I thought, okay, well, we're just going to sit here for a few more moments because I don't know what the bear is doing. So we continued. And then after I felt like it was enough time, we continued on walking past where the bear had crossed over, and didn't see the bear after that. But it just spoke to me about just being present with the energy, because I was calm, they were calm. And we just gave it space, and then we continued on. And then, and I saw somebody at the end of the trail, just let them know that there had been a bear. I don't know where it was by that point in time. And then with the other couple of bear experiences I've had with dogs, it was the same thing. I just noticed the bear, stopped in my tracks. We just stood still. And I think that part of that too, though, is in the same way that I have a connection with the dogs. I think there's just some sort of energetic connection that just lets me know, because I can drive down the road on the highway. And actually, this did happen once years ago. I was driving down the highway up into the interior, and I was with my former husband. I was like, there's a bear. And he's like, what? We were off the Coquihalla. I said, there's a bear. And it was way in the bush. And so anyways, he pulled over. There was nobody on the highway. We backed up. I was like, there he is. And he was tucked away over in the trees. So anyways, it's just some sort of connection. And like I say, I think being tuned into the energy was what made it successful.
Oh, thank you for sharing. Lesley, share with us about your business that you love.
Okay, well, this started out, you were talking about people that are doing non-traditional things. I was very traditional for many years. I was a stay-at-home mom and part-time office worker, and I worked in offices for years. And all of a sudden, when I was 50 years old, I guess my husband said it was midlife crisis. I went through this whole thing. I'm not doing this anymore. So I went back to university when I was 50, to the astonishment of everybody around me. Finished out my degree and got my certificate in teaching English as a second language. And at the time, the way to get into the field was generally it was young people that got into it, and they would go overseas and teach overseas for a couple of years to get experience before coming back to Vancouver and working in an English as a second language school. Well, of course, being 50 years old and having a family, that wasn't on the cards. So I discovered online teaching. And I discovered online that there were companies just beginning to advertise. This is back in 2004. Just beginning to advertise for teachers that would teach on the computer using a webcam. And I got connected with a company in Japan. Now, at the time, I did not know a soul with a webcam. So when I went out and bought one, I was the only person I knew that had a webcam. So the only way to test this webcam was to have a call with the gentleman in Japan that was running this online teaching company. Skype didn't exist at the time. We used MSN Messenger, which was very unstable. And the whole enterprise, I felt like a pioneer in cyberspace. You know, I didn't know anybody that was doing what I was doing. I didn't know anybody that had a webcam. And I didn't know anybody that had even thought that this might be something that was possible. So I stayed with them from 2004, actually until last year with the same company. They did all the promotion, all the advertising, got the clients, and I was basically just a contractor for them. And I enjoyed it very much. I got a job teaching in the classroom in a private language school in Vancouver, but I continued with the online teaching because it was my retirement plan. I wanted to continue to do this after I quit classroom teaching, and I'm still doing it. At the time when I first started teaching online, it was a new medium. So everything I'd learned about teaching in my courses, I had to kind of twig and jig and revise. Speaking and listening were unnatural because this is a very conversational medium. But when it came to reading and writing, I had to think of whole new approaches. So reading, I would actually send the people a link to an article and we would read them in parallel. They would have their copy in Japan and I would have my copy here. For writing, they would type things up in a Word document and email them to me, and I would do track changes. This stuff is all, it's all very commonplace now, but it wasn't back then, and basically I had to find my own methods at the time. There were very few online resources. Now, if you Google anything, there are all kinds of websites about English grammar, English vocabulary, pronunciation, everything else, right? But there was very little back then. Now, looking back, it's a very popular thing to do, especially since COVID. There are a lot more people teaching online now. Zoom has become a very popular medium. We actually changed from MSN Messenger to Skype, and a lot of my students I still have via Skype. But Zoom has brought a whole new dimension to this. We can share screens, we can do the whiteboard, so again, I'm still learning. I'm learning what I can do with Zoom now. So the learning curve continues.
How did you advertise yourself after the company stopped supporting teachers? How did you go about advertising yourself for getting students?
Most of my students are still old students from the company that they still wanted to take classes with me. Some word of mouth. and I have some local students that I've picked up through word of mouth. I also have a Facebook page. I've got some attention from that, but I haven't actually got any new clients through the Facebook page. But it's there for information if people want to check it, to look at my rates, that kind of thing. So basically word of mouth.
For the students to talk to each other?
No, I use Skype or Zoom, and it's one-on-one usually.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so if you were advising someone who was going to start off doing that now, what are the top 2 things you'd tell them to do?
Well, be very, very active on social media. I mean, I'm not that adept at social media, but this is really where we live these days, right? So it's not just Facebook, it's Twitter, it's all the other platforms that are out there. Get your own podcast, perhaps, would be another thing. So yeah, social media would be the big thing, right? And the other thing is to be prepared to teach in different time zones. If you teach in Japan, for example, which I still do, they're plus 16 or plus 17 hours, depending whether it's summertime or wintertime. So right now it's almost 2:00 here in Vancouver. It's actually 6:00 tomorrow morning in Japan. So that takes a little bit of getting used to. So yeah, that's the other adjustment.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions for Lesley? Oh, thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Chris, with your book and adventures with the audiobook, you want to share, you're muted.
Yeah.
You want to share some of what you have done with that business?
Well, we actually are, they're printed books. We're just talking about moving into the audiobook format. So with the writing group that I'm part of, because it was about writing, we decided that we would put together some of the writing that all of us did. And every year, we decide on a theme for that particular year. And this past year's, the book that we've currently done is called Together We Stand, Queer Elders Speak Out. So it gives everybody a broad base out of which to write. And then we put them there, we self-publish. So we put them together and then we self-publish with something called Lulu Press. Now, this is the first year, because of the pandemic, that we haven't actually been able to have a regular launch. Until this year, we've always had a launch with a lot of people there. But this year, of course, nobody's having gatherings of any size. And so this year, we had to find a more creative way to actually do the launch. And we have been working with a woman named Jen Marchbank, who is a professor at Simon Fraser University. And she also, as a volunteer, she runs a group in Surrey called Youth for a Change. And so we've done some work together between our group, which are all older adults, and the young people. And so she invited us to be part of the SFU Gender Studies, Women and Gender Studies 50th anniversary. And so that's how we were actually able to do our book launch through them. So the books are currently available. There's a number of copies at Little Sisters on Davy Street in the West End. And there's also copies at Co-op Bookstore on Commercial Drive. So it's also possible to order through Lulu Press, but we think it's much easier to actually buy a hard copy here in the city. And we have other copies that we can, if the stock gets depleted in those two places, we have more that we can fill their shelves with. So it's something that we've been doing for quite a number of years now. And I think it does a couple of things. One is it provides those of us who are part of the group, it provides us with a bit of an incentive and something to work towards in terms of having something to show for our work at the end of the year. And it also has given us a platform to actually put some of our stuff out, because I mean, this year we haven't had that many opportunities because of COVID, but in many in previous years we've been invited to go to lots of to different places and different groups and do readings. So it's kind of that double. It serves for those of us who to write, but it also serves as a way of getting some of a lot of its history. And we did one that was called Bridge Generation, which from our perspective was a historical piece in terms of those of us who are members of the lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual community. We are the generation that began with no legal rights at all and have gone through the process of political work and activism and so on to get to the place where we are now, where most of the LGBT rights we have most of the LGBT rights. We're still working on trans rights, but so we look at ourselves as the Bridge generation, going from the place where we had no rights to a place where we have many rights. One of the things that has been important for us is to be able to let people know that the rights that we achieved, none of them were actually given to us by the government. Every single right that we achieved often through the courts, and through a lot of activism and a lot of advocacy. Nobody turned around and said, "Oh, it's unjust that same-sex partners don't have benefits." No, we had to actually take it to the courts to actually get the courts. It's interesting that private companies, some of the major companies recognize same-sex partners and extended benefits to partners of their employees way before we got them through the public service, through the government. That we had to actually fight for. So the writing that we do reflects a lot of our own personal experience. Like the piece that I have in the book, in Together We Stand, is a piece about when my partner and I were returning to Canada after having been living overseas and having to figure out how, because my partner was not Canadian, how we were going to achieve being able to continue living together, because neither one of us could live legally in each other's country. And so my piece in that book deals with that whole issue, both on a personal level, but also on a political level. So we kind of bring the stories together out of our personal experience, but also bring them together in terms of action and political activity and change that we've made. I don't know, of course, this is a Zoom for those of us that can see, but I'm currently wearing a vest that friends of mine made for me that has the badge of the Order of Canada. I received the Order of Canada last year because of the work that I had done, that I began basically in Canada to enable same-sex partners, Canadians, to be able to sponsor same-sex partners for immigration. And so because of the work that I did and the organization that I formed, now the laws have been changed. And so same-sex partners are able to sponsor, a Canadian can sponsor their same-sex partner, and also also heterosexual common law partners can be sponsored. Interesting, tying in with what Lesley was saying about teaching English overseas, that it was very common for Canadians to go overseas, as you said, Lesley, to actually teach English, and then, of course, meet somebody and enter into a relationship. And then when their contract was ended, they want to come back to Canada. And what happened to their relationship? The relationship was either you had to end your relationship, or there was no way until we actually began bringing about this change. So the anthologies that we've written, as I've said, bring together their writing, in the sense that we have had instructors, and we've learned how to write well, hopefully, and also it provides us with a forum to bring together a lot of our personal and collective experience as members of the lesbian, gay, transgender, bisexual community.
And I must say, you've learned a way to do marketing as well, because last week when I was attending the seminar, I think it was an hour and a half, and I thought, oh, it's going to be a long time. But they did cliffhangers. They're very, like when we used to go to the movies and the plane would stop before it crashed, and they'd say in 2 weeks. Well, as Chris was telling the story about what was happening with their train ride, whether or not they were going to get stopped by customs or not, she stopped and she said, and if you want to know, you can get the book at. So I thought more than one person used that technique, and it was very engaging and a good marketing technique. And so we're going to be welcoming Quirky to have another lunch. They said that this was the first of several, so we are going to work out when we can have one of the book launches here at Powered by Age, and that very engaging set of stories that people tell. Does anyone have a question for Chris?
Yeah, I'd like to know, Chris, about your disciplines or practices in terms of writing. Like how do you have a specific commitment for writing, a certain amount of time each day, or what are some of your routines that keep you inspired to keep writing on a regular basis?
Yeah, so we're now, I think, in our 14th or 15th year together. We're of a group of more or less 25 people, and over the years, our process has changed. Initially, we had an artist, a writer, Claire Robson, who was our mentor. And so we went through, the learning different techniques in terms of character development, setting the scene, what do you call the arc, the story arc. So we learned a lot of those things, but we also wrote from prompts. So she would give us a prompt, and then we would each write to the prompt, and then we would share the writing with each other. And then we also had some critique that we would provide for each other. Now, as time has gone on, we no longer Claire's no longer with us for the last few years. And so we have what we call, we have a coordinating committee that actually works on that actually sort of keeps the process moving forward. And so what we've been doing for the last couple of years, we've divided into smaller groups because different people were interested in different genres. And so right now we have a fiction genre, we have a zine genre, and then we have one that's called pan graphics. So some of the graphics are written, some might be graphics, some are written, but it's all memoir. And so what we do is week 1 of every month, we have prompts. The coordinating committee, whoever's facilitating, put forward prompts for people to write to if they choose to. Some people, like there's somebody's working on a sci-fi story, and so she'll write stuff about her sci-fi story. I'm working on memoir, so I would write to memoir. So that's the first week that we all write something. Week 2 and week 3, we go into our small groups, and in our small groups, we can read, we can write, we can critique, we do whatever the small group decides that we need to do. And then on the last week of the month, we all come together as a larger group and we read things that people have written through the course of the month. And we do critique of people's writings. So we've changed our strategies. What people write and how much they write is really very individual and very personal. And I think most of us find that coming together every week is what has kind of kept us moving forward. I mean, sometimes I've written nothing, but the fact that I get together with this group continues to keep the idea of writing in the forefront of my mind. And I think on a Monday, I think, oh my God, I didn't write anything this week. Because Tuesday is the day that we get together these days on Zoom. So there is something of an incentive. And I know for my own self, it's really helpful to have written something and then to be able to read that out to the group and get feedback. That's been for me, that's been really helpful and really motivating. So I don't know if that quite answers your question, but
yeah, it does. It's very interesting. Thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot.
And now suddenly my environment has gone quiet.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I would support what Chris says about the motivation of belonging to a group. I also belong to a writers group that meets every Monday. And yeah, I keep writing so that I still have material to submit to the group when it's my turn, whether I feel like doing it or not. If it wasn't for that, I might put my project aside for weeks on end. But that just keeps me going.
Yes. How does that work with what you're doing, Joel?
Yeah, well, first of all, Chris, congrats on the award, the Order of Canada. That's an achievement, and clearly you put in the work and the effort for it. So that's it's great to hear.
Thank you. It took us 10 years to actually get the law changed.
Wow.
One of those 10-year overnight success stories.
That's right. Yes, that's right.
Regarding what I'm doing in terms of trying to make some money. And I have to get off this call to go catch flack from my supervisor for my latest rock and roll exploits. But this is what's gone on in the last little bit. So when I was doing the stuff at Christmas time with the microphone and singing songs, the Rat Pack stuff, I still had the microphone here. And a friend of mine who I knew through my roommate who ran a bar on Main Street and sort of basically a drinking friend at the bar. And he's a ex-music producer. Well, he's still a music producer, UK guy from the 80s, but hadn't done anything musically, but saw me playing at the bar, saw the band playing, and was like interested in what I was doing as a vocalist. So that's a few years back now, but he has business up here and also in California in San Jose on an environmental tech company. And he was down in his studio in San Jose when COVID hit and wasn't able to come back. So he's been stuck over on that side of things since a year ago now. And at some point, not too long ago, he started sending me these recordings of songs that he grew up with and like got him into music and into playing in touring bands and being a producer, and mainly 70s prog rock, Pink Floyd, Genesis, Rolling Stones, that type of thing. And I've been sending these songs up, and I was using that same mic that I had up here to do our singing sessions and laying down some vocals and sending them back. And the results are very good, surprisingly for the microphone that I'm using. But his production is like off the charts. So he's really excited by what we've been producing here, and it's developing into a full album, actually. So I want to get the full album done here in Campbell River, kind of just to complete it that way. I'm singing, looking at the wharf here, and it's kind of like for me, it's where I got to get this work done. For him, it's just his collection of songs that he's interested in. So I'm actually using it as part of my PhD, where I'm talking about packaging and brand value and how you take things and rework them into ways that create new value. And so I've taken these songs and I've kind of repackaged them in a way that I could make some money. Now, here's the conceit of it is, him and I both know, because we're music industry guys, that Spotify and streaming, Apple Music and all that, it doesn't make any money for the artists. It's just a shell game. And you could see that kind of coming. And so here we are, these two old music industry guys that get together and making this music. And we know it can't make money on streaming. So how do you make money with music in today's climate? Well, you have to sell something. You got to use the music to sell something, or get it in a film, or get it on TV or whatever, and have some rights that residuals get sent your way. So given that he's a wine collector and booze collector, and my roommate, same sort of thing as a bartender, so high-end drinks and stuff, I invented this fictional distillery that we belong to, or that we co-own or whatever, right? Whatever the story is, I haven't quite figured out all the details, but the point is we've got this fictional distillery that we decided, hey, we need a way to sell more product, and we should have our music that we love and that we're doing these versions of, and use that, create an album, and use that album to sell the music on TV or whatever it is. The story, as I said, is in development. But it's effectively fake booze, right? It's not a real distillery. And yet, as we're putting these things together, it's kind of like, well, what would it take to do that? You know, what practically would be involved in getting something like that up and running, at least in terms of what I'm working on the business PhD, in terms of how to use a simulation to understand a market and to understand the costs and understand how to maybe get something done before investing lots in it and then getting stuck. So it's kind of a case study exercise, but that has got us all engaged in a way that I'm like, okay, I got to get this done now, and I got to get these songs out, and I got to and none of the songs are my choices either. So it's kind of like karaoke where somebody's challenging you to a song, right. And I'm like learning them. And they're coming out fresh that way. They're not stale things that I've sang millions of times, or not millions, but and then the other interesting part about it, getting back to Lesley and sort of that pioneering a tech remote thing, is neither of us have ever worked this way remotely. You know, you're in a studio, you're in a sound booth, you're making takes, you're making cuts and working it that way. And we're sending these things over the internet, using Google Docs, using Trello, using organizational tools, and it's working. Like it's actually, we created a workflow where he'll send me the instrumental. I won't really know the song, so I'll figure out where the words go and do a couple takes and send something back, and then he'll send something back, and then I'll figure out how I want to work the song in terms of, do I want it to sound just like the original, or do I want to play around with it? But reasonably being able to do prototyping, if you will, of these objects, right? Which are these, songs. They're still objects. They're not physical things, but we still are working with them like these building blocks and objects that we're designing. So there's a lot of stuff that this fun little rock and roll exercise has inspired a bit in terms of the work that I'm doing, but also insights into the work itself by being practical and by not being theoretical, which is my fear. And I feel the institutional stuff with the university that pulled down the theoretical lane, and then, where did I go? How do I get back to reality? So I'm trying to keep it real, but I'm keeping it rock and roll and singing some songs, and also so I can get a CD for my mom so that she can play in her car. Just bought yesterday because the other car broke down and we had to get her a new car, and now this car has a CD player in it, and so I'm like, damn it, I'm gonna get a CD and put it in that car so you can hear the whole thing. So and then also because I don't want to be screaming away in the house, and also trying to get it to versions that can be put on a CD. I'm like getting these vocal takes done while she's out on a walk or at church or getting groceries or whatever. So it's like, I got a time frame here. I gotta do some screaming right now and knock some stuff down, and then I'll work on it. And so it's actually, it's been productive, surprisingly in a way that I didn't see coming 2 weeks ago, let's say. And maybe it'll make money. You don't know.
Yeah.
So fictionally, it'll make money. In my case study for my PhD, it will make lots of money. That's right. That's my story. Sorry.
Yeah. So I got a couple of questions, Joel.
Yeah.
The first thing is, you talked about this distillery, and I wasn't quite sure what the relationship was between the distillery and the music. Is it just a business model, or are you actually selling alcohol, or what's the story?
Well, yes, is because the way that music actually makes money now is through product sales, by licensing it to some commercial or to use in commercial cases. Right? You're not selling records anymore. And artists can't go on tour anymore either, because it was like, well, you're not going to make money selling records, so you can make your money going on tour and selling T-shirts, and that's how the game is for all the up and coming bands now, and they're all lost, and everyone's lost in the industry. So right now, a lot, and you'll see this actually. You've seen Bob Dylan sold the music rights to his catalog for a huge amount of money, and that's triggered a bunch of other major artists that are selling their catalogs off to companies that are going to use these catalogs for licensing purposes to whatever film, TV, product placement, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like the reverse George Clooney. So he's got a brand of tequila that he sells through the fact that he's a celebrity, right? I'm not a celebrity, but the point would be, you're using some sort of cultural piece, some sort of cultural object or whatever it is, whether it's a person, whether it's music, whether it's the location that you're selling, to sell the music. So you find ways to license music for products.
So now, like Paul Newman's salad dressing kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. So he's selling his brand as himself. But like, I'm trying to think, like Led Zeppelin never wanted to sell to their music for commercials, and now you hear it in car commercials. And that's Led Zeppelin. But the point is to go, okay, how does music get sold? Well, it has to attach itself to something else that's being sold as a product, and then taking some return from that thing. Does that make sense?
Well, I'm still confused. So there's actually two things here. You could actually get the music used in movies, in commercials. So they're actually using your music. That's one thing. The other thing is this connection with the distillery. Would it be like, buy a bottle of vodka and get a free CD or something like that?
Well, like, you've been to Starbucks and you see the compilation CDs that are being sold there when you go buy your coffee. Okay, so those are licensed by Starbucks to be able to be sold.
Okay.
And I mean, you can buy these, you can stream these songs off of Spotify and Apple Music and all that. But if you wanted to buy that physical thing that's sitting there, that whoever the music publisher is cut a deal with Starbucks, probably for a lot of money, to be able to sell those things, kind of those spot purchases, impulse buys that people do. How long that's going to last, we don't know, right? How long discs are even going to be a format. So I'm playing around with ideas, obviously. It's experimental, but there's some value in my arguments in looking at a physical bottle product on a shelf and comparing that with a song as an item.
Okay.
Right?
So it's more of a business model than anything else.
Oh, I've seen that though with the gamification, because I watched one of my grandsons 6 hours playing with something where they were building a fort, and it went on for hours. They built the fort, and then with Sims, my daughter used to play Sims, and that was like back in the day, people would make things and people would buy their designs. It's a totally hypothetical building, but people would pay $100, $200, a lot of money for a design somebody had made for a particular store. It was never going to be built, but people like that store. And I think in some of the other games, people buy weapons. People, kids that are in the gamification are making thousands of dollars over imaginary things that they built, but because people like it, they want that weapon, or they want that cloth, or they want that. So that's kind of what I'm picturing, is that you have this distillery, and it's an imaginary place, but people go there, or they see it as a place that they enjoy the music.
Yeah, it's a little different than that. That's a completely virtual world space, which does have licensing things going on. Like music gets licensed to those games, or music in TikTok or whatever the apps are, right? That's where these guys buying up the rights are seeing, that's where the money's going to come from, is licensing these things to games and the platforms and film and TV, or selling products. And what I'm talking about isn't creating a virtual distillery that somebody can go to on the internet. It's more a market research planning exercise to understand how much it would cost to set up a physical distillery in this location, and use the simulation tools to get a better understanding of its design, of its costs, of the constraints that go on. Because ultimately I'm a design prof that has to look at those financial, physical, tangible, virtual constraints and find that balance that makes it a viable thing to do. So what I'm doing is inventing this imaginary distillery, but I've got it branded and everything, and people have seen, a song that I send with the logo and everything, and they think it's a real distillery. And I went, oh, okay, well, what if it was? And just kind of like imaginarily going down these paths to try and understand the problem space a bit better. And it's been valuable.
Yeah, and I think we're all struggling with, what does it mean to live in cyberspace, right?
And what does it mean to live between physical and digital? And a lot of my work also deals with, I said like packaging is part of it. This idea of objects that act as containers. And you can see this understanding going on with what Luke and I were doing down in the storage room there, right? These containers that act as containers, but they're also things that hold other objects in them. And so part of what I'm working on is that digital to physical and physical to digital, like a vinyl record is not digital. It's
right.
But that vinyl record contains songs. It acts as a container, right? And a case of beer is a number of bottles in a container, right? So that pattern of container nested inside another container, like Russian dolls types of things, is part of digital infrastructure and part of its culture. And I wouldn't say it's something that's not recognized, but the implications of that model is what I'm working on and playing it out in terms of business models, particularly.
Yeah, and the other thing as I was listening to you is I was reminded of sort of parallels with writing and, the physical book versus the ebook. So do you see a lot of similarities there too?
Well, yes, because part of this idea is, okay, it used to be that you'd have vinyl records and then they would get turned into digital songs and then they would go up into the internet, into Napster, and now streaming and all that. So we had these physical things that have moved into the digital space. Now, what I'm doing with my partner on this project down in California is actually starting in the digital space and building the songs in there. And theoretically, they could be taken out of the physical space and pressed on records physically to pair with a couple bottles of rum and gin or whatever. And then you're designing an experience for that person who can listen to put the record on, light a candle, whatever you do as part of that routine, or there's a word for it, ritual. And pour a glass of rum and whatever. So it's that experiences are where all this is kind of going. People are realizing they don't want to hold on to so much physical stuff, and actually the experiences go with you, right? You take them around. When you go to a conference or they'll dump all this merch and trinkets and pens and it ends up staying in the hotel room because you don't have room for it, right? So instead, the focus is more designing these experiences that people then go back and talk to the rest of their colleagues about, and it's a richer sort of dialogue than you would have with just showing them this pen. So that's in the area of what my work is about. And as I said, it's kind of sidetracked me from what I was supposed to be doing from a boss. But he's a music guy too. And I think he'll appreciate how I've tied some of these things together that were kind of, well, how do we get this to work with this? And he's a vinyl collector, so he'll get that part of it. Even if he doesn't drink the gin, I will.
Well,
okay, very cool. Okay.
All of these things connect together really well. And we can be living contributors to your PhD project.
Well, I'm going to need some test cases. I have to that's what I'm actually designing right now, is how is the study going to work? What am I looking for? What am I trying to test? What am I trying to understand? And how do I design a study with focus groups? All the dots and crossing the T's of all that sort of the details of a proper study and getting ethics approval and all that. I might have to cut the booze side of it all out together, but we'll see.
Yeah, I pancake presentation I was going to make, but it was on this transition from in 1989, or 10 years, I worked for the Toronto Health Department as a health promotion consultant. And on a day when it was minus 28 below, I was returning to the health department after doing a workshop. And it was cold. And I slowed down to cross the intersection. I had this defensive driving course, and they told you, when you're entering an intersection, slow down, wait for the car to pass. So I slowed down, but the woman behind me was obviously stressed out. She hit my car and she knocked me off to the struts at the side. And so I had a brain hematoma and a spinal injury. And all of the way that I made my money then, was through using my brain and reading and writing, and words would run around the page. Literally, the policeman at the hospital, I gave him my phone book and I said, I know I have a friend in here, but the words are just running around. And so I had, they gave me a month of time to work from home, and I had an experience with a really terrible supervisor who didn't understand some of the things that we've discussed within this podcast about recovery from concussion. And I had to write this big report about a project that I had done. And of course, it was cuckoo. It wasn't all pulled together. And she said, well, she used a stupid colloquium, but she said, like you burnt your bridge because you didn't write this report. I gave you a month to write the report, but no support and so forth. So the next project that I worked on for the health department was to help communities understand when drugs were coming into the community. And we went out and we were doing evening workshops, and I was carrying all this gear, but I had all these vials of pills to take. And so after 6 months, I wrote a letter to the medical officer of health, and I said, it is totally contradictory for me to be going out talking to communities on how to detect drugs coming in, when to do this job, I've got these pills I have to take so that my body can move. I have these that I have to take so my head, my brain, you're telling my brain that your body doesn't hurt. And then because these things destroy my stomach, I've got another vial of pills for my stomach. So it is totally contradictory. And I went on a medical leave. But in going on that, and I was working with, it had begun, because your insurance only covers so much of care from a chiropractor and stuff like laser care, etc. And so I had been getting really beneficial effects from electronic muscle stimulation equipment. I certified on that equipment and began to get customers showing people how to use the equipment. Well, I could see with, the money that you get, the difference in what you get when you have a salary and you get a third of that amount through disability. I could calculate the months that I was going to lose my house. I had 3 children. Was divorced and not having any state assistance or what do you call it? Child support money. So I about June, I could say I'm going to lose my house by August. And I wrote a proposal to the company to just once a month go to the States and represent this neuromuscular stimulation equipment. And the person said, but what's happening next month? And I said, well, this plan starts from August. And he liked the idea so much, he told the person, book a ticket, send it to Los Angeles. And I started working in Los Angeles, representing Canadian companies in fair shows, etc. But my head was still hurting and I was losing my children. I could take my children someplace and it would take me an hour to figure out how to get back to where I left them. And I had a fairy godmother, I'll call her. She wasn't my godmother from birth, but she adopted me. And this is a woman who was the first Black woman to win a Tony on Broadway. And she had a dramatic company. And in that company, you had to learn she operated like Sammy Davis Jr. You had to speak, dance, and act. And I thought I could not sing. And it was in my head that I was tone deaf. And so once she was having a rehearsal, and so she said, everybody stop. The altos are off. And I said, I'm sorry. And she said, it's not you. It's the person next to you that you are following that's off. So working with her started to really change my mind about some things. And then I began to, poetry was the first thing that I was able to first start, just yell at life, be angry with life about, and my poems were in these notebooks. And then as I worked with groups and started getting involved with churches, I had my poems typed up. And they were in these things that I would staple and give. And then people started to buy them. And so I thought, well, this is pretty good because I'm selling these staple sets. And then now I'm doing workshops. But one of the things from the workshops that actually took me to the 411 Center, I did. My poems got grouped into these different areas. I wrote this book kind of from the experience of what happened to me in Toronto. It's called From Pillows to Pillars, but it was a woman's tear-soaked journey from tear-soaked pillows to pillars of strength. And it had 6 sections. It was poems dealing with anger and social injustice. I had 100 of them. Poems dealing with the heartache or the blues. I had 100 of them. Poems dealing with grief and anger and heartache. Tons of those. But then the next 3, faith, hope, and love. 2 hope, 2 love, 1 faith. And it took me a number of years to move to the point where I published the book from these sections of poems that I would take and read at convalescent centers or read at different places and read it at just read it a number of places. So this was my first thing that I actually began to make money with because from working with the woman that was like a mentor and having me memorize things, because I said I wanted to be in one of her shows. And she said, you have to memorize 3 poems. And these were classical pieces, classical Negro poems. And some of those have a particular rhyming pattern. And I said, I can't. And she said, can't is an animal too lazy to try. And so through the desire to be a part of her workshop company and perform some of these things at schools, I learned the poems for her place, but I also started memorizing some of the poems that were in this book, because unlike the open mic that we have, we've been an open mic group with Lesley, where you can read. With this group, you could not do any stand-up or open mic unless you had memorized your work. So poetry was both a healing form, but it also became a place where I began to make some money. I had another injury, but the experience of working with people, both from seeing the transition that could come about with poetry, visioning, getting feedback, as Chris mentioned. Within our workshop group, we would get feedback. We would meet every Saturday, and every Saturday you had to have a monologue, and every Saturday you would do your personal piece, and then you would get feedback. And so the next week she would be looking for us to have made some improvements around developing something of our own, as well as learning these classic things. So I made a CD. I made a CD for this book, and it had 9 poems on it. I had the experience. First, I was hiring my own musicians, and people would be late or they wouldn't show up. And there's a guy named, let's look at his name. Oh my God. Mark Cargill. Mark Cargill was the principal violinist for Barry White. When you hear Barry White's music and you hear violins, he's either conducting the violins or he's playing the red violin. And he had a very ethical studio in Los Angeles. And he, even though he had people like Queen Latifah and some other people that had Grammy projects out of his studio, he adopted 4 or 5 people that were independents a year to be able to work in the studio. It's a studio that was like $200 an hour to use, and to work in at $55 an hour. And he said, when you get ready to work on your event, don't tell them that they're doing it for you. Tell them that they're going to be working for Mark Cargill. So everybody was on time. I had people, 6 or 7 musicians that played with all kinds of artists doing music. But what I've noticed now, as you said, Joel, I have the CD and another CD. I have 3 CDs, and they're on CD Baby. But I'm hearing them on YouTube, hearing them on other places. And I said, but I'm not making any money. They're on there. So they sent me 50 pages of printout. And it came to $96. There's 7 minutes. There's some place in Japan that has played my things the most, but it's like, since they pay by the minute, I have 7 cents, 8 cents, 6 cents, 2 cents, 3 cents from the minutes that people streamed it. So it isn't. Right now, the point that I'm looking at within my own music is, how do I make money with it? I have 3 CDs. I have 20 songs. I've been, just before the pandemic, I was talking with Joel and Luke about how can I transfer some of this work from written books to audiobooks, because now a lot of people are using audiobooks. Audible used to only let you do an audio book if you had a book, but now you can do an audio book from a recording. So I'm really interested in looking at how do we transform these things that we've made, like the poetry and that Neil has put on our spin cycle. On the PBA site, we have the spins, the stories, poetry, etc. Somebody is calling. I'm sorry, I'm on a call. You have to call me back.
Charlotte, I apologize. I have to go take a call now as well. 2:30.
So I think that just all of these things that we're doing, there's a point that they come together. And this work that you're doing is very important with just helping us see how we can make that transition to the other forms and being able to make money.
Well, I can pick up that conversation on a future podcast episode, Zoom episode here. So
Yes.
signing off all. We'll see you next week, hopefully. All right.
Okay,
yes,
great.
thank you.
And before I leave, I've got the information on the book launch. It's called A Poetry of Place, Journeys Across New Westminster, Book E-Launch, March the 11th at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And I'm sure that if you Google the title, which is A Poetry of Place, Journeys Across New Westminster, you'll find information with the Zoom link. It's actually a public event.
Okay, that's good. And next week, we're going to be having a special panel, and we're going to be celebrating the life of Sharon Gill, who was a union leader. He was an activist within the food industry, but an activist and a person that's worked on a lot of the laws that different elder groups have worked on. So he was part of the board for 611, not 61, part of the board for the 411 Senior Center. And some of the board members are going to recount the ways that he put his energy into challenging things. So even though it's Women's History Month, one of the things that we're looking at too is that women also celebrate the work that's been done by men and by activists that have helped everyone's cause. So that's going to be our podcast on next week. And so we will continue with the challenge to change and look forward as we champion each other with our businesses and the ways that this podcast might inspire other people who are challenging the old ways of making money and being open to looking at ways to do things using their creativity, their tenacity, as Lesley said, the things you love to do. Nansey said, things that you love to do, that it's truth, that if you pursue what you love and you are able to sit still, be quiet, and work on it, that can be a way of making money for you. So goodbye to you. Thank you for tuning in, and I will see you again